Has your homeland been subjugated by silver-haired, violet-eyed, incestuous aliens from across the narrow sea? Have the skies over your domain been darkened under the dread wings of their giant magical beasts? Whether you are a low-born shepherd whose flock has been consumed by your liege lord's infernal drakes, or a great lord whose mighty host was incinerated on the field of battle, one thing is clear: the dragons have to go. But how, you may ask, can mere mortal men, stuck in a state of medieval stasis, exterminate a species of naturally armoured, free-flying magical leviathans capable of annihilating entire battalions of massed infantry in minutes and breathing fire hot enough to melt stone? Luckily for you, while killing a dragon is a monumentally difficult task, it's not impossible. So if you happen to have nothing left to live for and have no qualms with the prospect of almost certain death, then we welcome you to join us as we explore all the ways that dragons in the world of Ice and Fire have been killed, in both legend and recorded history, and analyze the ways that you might be able to take one down yourself. Since the time of Aegon's conquest, it has been well known that the rules of conventional warfare go out the window when the dragons of House Targaryen take the field. No component of a feudal army is a match for a fully grown dragon. Amassing spearmen before a dragon is about as valid a military tactic as lining up dishes of roast meats upon a lord's feasting table. Missile fire from arrows, slings, and javelins tends to merely bounce off the dragon's scaly hide. Sheltering behind stone walls is no solution either, a fact attested to by Harren the Black and the half-melted towers of the eponymously doomed castle of Harrenhal. There is, however, one simple way to level the playing field: acquiring a dragon of your own. Indeed, the most prolific killers of dragons in the recorded history of Westeros are other dragons. The greatest outbreak of dragon-on-dragon violence occurred during the brutal Targaryen civil war, poetically dubbed the Dance of the Dragons. If you've been keeping up with the House of the Dragon TV show, or read the original Fire and Blood novel it is based on, then you are likely already reasonably familiar with the background behind the conflict, which pits the so-called Blacks faction supporting Queen Rhaenyra against the so-called Greens faction supporting her half-brother, King Aegon II. Many a dragon dogfight occurred during this royal dynastic struggle, each resulting in the death of at least one beast. The most prolific dragon killer during this time was Vhagar, the oldest, largest, and deadliest of her species by the time of the dance. With the fearsome Aemond One-Eye as her rider, the Granny Vhagar inaugurated the open conflict between the Blacks and the Greens by chomping down on the much smaller adolescent dragon Arrax and his rider Lucerys Velaryon in the skies above Shipbreaker Bay. Later, during the Battle of Rook's Rest, Aemond and Vhagar engaged in an aerial duel with the she-dragon Meleys and her rider Rhaenys Targaryen. Known as the Red Queen, Meleys was far larger than the juvenile Arrax had been, and put up a far greater fight. Unfortunately for Meleys, she was outnumbered when King Aegon joined the fray atop the resplendent golden dragon Sunfire and was torn to death. But not before she had flame-broiled half of King Aegon's body and gravely wounded Sunfire by crunching down on his neck. Vhagar ultimately met her match in the bloodworm Caraxes and his rider, the rogue Prince Daemon Targaryen. As the strongest champions on either side of the war, Daemon and Aemond agreed to settle their differences in a mano-a-mano duel. What followed was one of the most epic dragon fights in history, with Vhagar and Caraxes tearing into each other with claws and teeth, their roars echoing across the land. In the end, both dragons fell to their deaths, crashing into the God's Eye, their bodies sinking beneath the waters. Vhagar was not the only dragon to claim an intra-species kill count during the dance. At the climactic Second Battle of Tumbleton, a riderless and maddened Vermithor brought down both Seasmoke and Tessarion before succumbing to his own wounds, while the Golden Sunfire, separated from his rider at Rook's Rest, hunted and devoured both the Wild Dragon Grey Ghost and Princess Baela's Moondancer. Of course, this information is ostensibly useless to anyone without silver hair or purple eyes. It's all well and good to say that the best way to kill a dragon is to acquire a dragon of your own, but everyone knows that only those with royal Targaryen blood can claim a dragon. But is that really true? During the dance, Crown Prince Jacaerys Velaryon sent out a call across the Crownlands, proclaiming that anyone who could tame one of the Widerless worms on Dragonstone and fight alongside Queen Rhaenyra as dragon riders would be given lands, titles, and riches. Of all the many minor lords and lowborn bastards who attempted this impossible feat, most were eaten alive. 4, however, managed to bend a dragon to their will. 3 of these new so-called dragon seeds were the bastard children of past Targaryens. The 4th, however, was Nettles, a dark-haired, brown-skinned homeless girl from the streets of Spicetown. Having tamed the notoriously vicious wild dragon Sheepstealer by feeding him his favourite meal of mutton every day, Nettles is the only known dragon rider in Westerosi history to have no known Targaryen blood or connection to the ancient dragon-riding empire of Valyria, and was incidentally the only dragon rider to survive alongside her dragon until the end of the dance. Her story is proof that, while it is extremely unlikely that you, humble viewer, can tame a wild dragon and beat the Targaryens at their own game, the chances of you doing so are technically not 0. The bond between a dragon and its rider is one which has yet to be fully understood, although it is almost certainly magical in nature. Indeed, one legend has it the dragons themselves are magical creatures, created by ancient blood mages, whose infernal rituals predate even the rise of old Valyria. If it is true that dragons were made by sorcery, then by sorcery may they also be unmade. One example of sorcery being used against the supernatural fire-breathing lizards occurred during a time when the ancient Valyrian freehold was at its height, conquering vast swathes of the continent of Essos on the backs of hundreds of tamed dragons. One of the victims of Valyrian expansion was the equally ancient Rhoynar civilization. Living along the banks of the mighty and titular Rhoyne River, the Rhoynar were a water people whose wizards practiced a form of water magic. During the Second Spice War, fought between Rhoynar and the city of Folon Theris, the Rhoynar managed to slay 2 dragons with the help of their water wizards, who subsequently conjured a vengeful flood to drown the Valyrian colony. Unfortunately for the Rhoynar, their elemental advantage of water against fire could not save them from the overwhelming force of over 300 dragon riders sent from the freehold proper to finish them off. With the majority of their male population slaughtered, the Rhoynish queen Nymeria led her people across the narrow sea to Westeros, where they merged with the local Andals to become the Dornish. Another form of magic worth discussing is the green magic practiced by the followers of the old gods of Westeros, primarily the primordial children of the forest and the first men of the north. Practitioners of this particular brand of animistic nature power are capable of walking, that is to say, transporting their souls into the bodies of animals. While it is yet unknown if a warg is capable of possessing a dragon, as he might a hawk or a wolf, the possibility cannot be discounted. Another man with a plan to conquer dragons through magic is the eldritch, apocalyptic figure of a pirate named Euron Greyjoy. While the television adaptation presents a rather different Euron Greyjoy, the character in the main Song of Ice and Fire novels is an apocalyptic warlock, striving to bring about the end times. Among the most dangerous of Euron's possessions is a giant horn named Dragonbinder, which, as the name suggests, is said to be able to bind dragons to its owner's will. The sound that Dragonbinder emits resembles the screaming of 1,000 souls, harrowing its listeners down to the bones. After first having blown it during the Kingsmoot of the Ironborn, Euron explained its origin to his people. "That horn you heard I found amongst the smoking ruins that were Valyria, where no man has dared to walk but me. You heard its call and felt its power. It is a dragon horn, bound with bands of red gold and Valyrian steel graven with enchantments. The dragon lords of old sounded such horns before the doom devoured them. With this horn, Iron Men, I can bind dragons to my will." At this point in the unfinished book series, we have yet to find out if Euron's plan to locate Daenerys Targaryen and seize control of all 3 of her dragons will succeed. But there is convincing evidence that Dragonbinder is what he says it is. The servant who blew the horn at the Kingsmoot, a man named Cragorn, died shortly after performing the task, collapsing with his lips blistered and his lungs charred to soot. It seems clear that the artifact Euron wields is imbued with the ancient magics the Valyrians used to tame their dragons. On that token, perhaps the horn could be used to destroy dragons as well. This theory is supported by none other than the Doom of Valyria that destroyed the great dragon-riding empire and brought its mounts to the brink of extinction. What exactly caused the volcanic cataclysm which shattered the freehold and incinerated the vast majority of its dragons remains a mystery. However, it is unlikely it was a natural disaster, but was instead a fatal pulse of the very same magic used to create the dragons, now manifesting in an apocalypse to bring about their end. All in all, the world of Ice and Fire is replete with different forms of esoteric wizardry, most forms of which are nearly impossible to access, and fraught with dangers in its use. However, if you're willing to take the risk, then go ahead and seek them out. If you do not end up losing your body, mind and soul to an ancient power beyond your understanding, you may very well emerge with the power to destroy dragonkind. Not every means of dragon slaying is so inherently metaphysical. Throughout recorded history, normal, unexceptional humans have killed dragons through various means. Stories of Dragonslayers in Westerosi folklore extend far back beyond the Targaryen conquest and into the ancient Age of Heroes. The most famous of these is Serwyn of the Mirror Shield, a legendary warrior who supposedly served the ancient Gardener kings of the Reach thousands of years before Aegon's conquest. As his title might suggest, Serwyn slew a dragon named Urex by approaching the beast behind his polished shield so the dragon only saw its own reflection, then spearing Urex through his eye. This tale, passed down through millennia, is the one depicted in the puppet show presented in The Hedge Knight and A Tale of the Seven Kingdoms by Dunk's Dornish crush, Tansel Tootle. It is easy to dismiss the tale of Serwyn as fictional, given that he lived thousands of years before the Targaryen conquest, and only appears in the annals of Westeros after Aegon the Conqueror introduced them to the continent a mere 300 years ago. There is, however, credible evidence involving the stone fused with dragonfire at the base of the tower in Old Town that suggests dragons did inhabit Westeros in ancient times, before the Targaryens' arrival. Perhaps then the story of Serwyn is true after all, and if you have a mirror on hand and a nearby dragon that needs slaying, it may be worth trying to recreate the events of the ancient legend. While Serwyn's tale is likely mythological, verified accounts of normal humans slaying dragons exist in the more recent written record. The first and most infamous instance occurred 300 years prior to the events of the main series, during Aegon the Conqueror's attempted conquest of Dorne, the lone kingdom of Westeros which did not submit to his rule. Rather than face the Conqueror's 3 dragons in the open field, the Dornish fought a guerrilla war, using the mountains and caves to shield themselves from dragonfire. During this brutal, asymmetrical struggle, an unnamed Dornish artilleryman on the battlements of Hellholt nailed the elder dragon Meraxes through the eye, sending her and her rider, Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, plummeting to their deaths. As the triumph of Serwyn and the death of Meraxes both demonstrate, the eye is the principal weak spot of the dragon. While the odds of piercing a dragon through the eye mid-flight are 1 in a million at best, it is the only vulnerable part of the monster's body not protected by impervious scales. With that said, the hide of younger dragons tends to be softer and more vulnerable to conventional missile fire. The Battle of the Gullet demonstrated this. When the Triarchy ambushed the Valyrian fleet, Stormcloud, ridden by the future King Aegon III, was pierced by a ballista bolt and arrow before reaching altitude, his untempered scales offering little protection. His rider survived, but the dragon perished. Vermax, ridden by Prince Jacaerys, was torn from the sky by grapnels and harpoons and drowned in the wreckage below. Killing a dragon with arrows, javelins, or other ranged missile fire is possible and has been done. However, the chances of landing a killing blow before the dragon engulfs you in fire remain extremely low. If you fancy yourself a marksman and consider yourself exceptionally lucky, make the attempt, especially if the dragon you're seeking to slay is a younger and smaller member of its species. The final method of dragon extermination to discuss is to trap the beasts in an enclosed space and overwhelm them with sheer weight of numbers. Historically, this has been the single most effective way by which non-magical, non-dragon riding humans have culled the great worms. At the height of the Dance of the Dragons, Queen Rhaenyra had conquered King's Landing, but was losing control of its people. Increasingly unpopular, the small folk rose up against her, roused to fervent religious frenzy by a mad prophet known simply as the Shepherd. Through his fiery sermons, the Shepherd proclaimed that dragons were demon spawn of the godless Valyrians and the doom of men. An angry mob formed and made for the Dragonpit, a massive cavernous building overlooking the city, where the Targaryen dragons were kept chained and stabled when not being ridden. Overwhelming the city watch and dragon keepers at the gates, the mob stormed inside, swarming upon the dragons while they were chained. Unable to fly away, the dragons turned their stable pens into slaughterhouses with teeth, claws and fire. Yet the swarm kept coming, climbing over the fallen, and soon the dragons began to die. The young dragon Shrikos was slain by a woodcutter named Hob, who leapt upon her neck, locked his legs around her, and hacked through her softer, juvenile scales, splitting her skull with 7 blows of his axe, while calling out the names of the 7 gods of the Andals. The remaining 3 dragons, Morkel, Taraxes, and Helena's Dreamfire, each met their end in the chaos that followed, stabbed through the eye by a man who walked through Dragonflame to do it, buried under a tide of bodies, and crushed beneath the collapsing dome, respectively. Ultimately, there are quite a few ways to kill a dragon. It just so happens that most of them are extremely perilous. Whether the path to becoming a Dragonslayer involves taming a dragon of your own, dabbling in eldritch sorcery, landing an incredibly lucky shot, or joining a swarm of human shields, the path to vanquishing one of the Great Worms is one that almost certainly ends in your fiery death. Nevertheless, it was ultimately a combination of the ancient magic of old Valyria, inter-dragon bloodletting, and the determination of humans wielding spears, axes, arrows, and ballistae that led to the extinction of dragonkind before the events of A Game of Thrones. More videos on the world of Ice and Fire are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.